Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Flight Training the Way I See It with your host, me, Mike Shiflett. And I'm going to be going through some news with you today, and opinion, and some pro tips. We've got that going on. In fact, let's just go through the show outline because that kind of makes sense. We should be about 25 minutes or so. That's about, so if you're driving and you're cruising along somewhere, it's about how long we've got. Help keep you entertained and informed what's going on. We're going to talk about where ADS-B is required, and a lot of people don't know that it's not required everywhere. So if you're in places where you don't have ADS-B, it's not required, you may not see ADS-B traffic, even though there may be traffic outside. So we'll talk about that, and I've got you can actually get a graphic from the FAA on that. I put it in our newsletter. By the way, while I'm on that topic, if you want to get our newsletter, which is basically this on PDF, with some other maybe offers or things in it, but generally that's what it is. And if you want to get that, go to CFIBootcamp.com. You'll find a way to opt in for the newsletter. And if you're not a Power Hour person, Power Hours are every Saturday from noon until 1 Eastern time. And this one, which is tomorrow, because I'm doing this on September the 21st, I guess it's 18, 19, 20, no, 22nd. Today is 22nd. Then tomorrow's Power Hour is going to be Cessna 152, the 152nd one. So I've done a lot of those. That's almost 7 days, 24/7 talking. So anyway, you can join live for free. If you join our membership site, then you'll get all the Power Hours, but don't do that on the website. Tip of the day, join the Power Hour. There's a red bar in our homepage. And if you log on to CFIBootcamp.com, you'll see it's red bar. It goes all the way across. And click that, and you'll opt in to the Power Hour reminders kind of email. And then once the show is over, you'll get a recap. And it's a PDF outline of what I used for the show. And in there will be a link to the membership site, and it'll be at a substantially reduced rate. The Power Hour people always get our best things, so and our best prices. So that's definitely want to do that. Instead of $22 a month, it's $9. So, and then you get everything. So that's not a bad deal. But anyway, just to let you know what to do on that. Let's carry on. Let me just tell you what's going on with the rest of the show. So, understanding ADS-B, what's required. What causes advection fog that comes up a lot. What's the difference between radiation fog and advection fog? It's almost time for the fog in San Francisco to go away for the winter. There's a reason for that. We'll talk about that. Especially if you're in the Bay Area, it's kind of nice to know. You may know it already, but we'll definitely go through it for those of you who don't. Then we're going to announce we just completed a CFI Bootcamp at a new location. We're going to talk about that, how that went, what you can do, and talk about VA benefits. Ooh, there's a lot of you going to be interested in that. And we're going to go through 3 pro tips at the end of the show. So I guess we'll kick it off here. Not much else to say, but get started, right? So let's talk about ADS-B. So what does ADS-B mean? It's Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, ADS-B. So what it is, basically it's a way for controllers to replace radar. So because your ADS-B equipment out broadcasts down to ADS-B receivers on the ground, which pick up your transponder, your tail number, your altitude, and all of that, and relay it to air traffic control. So one day, we don't need radar anywhere, but it's always, it would be good as a backup, like VORs and such, because we'll have ADS-B where we need it, and we see all these transponder targets, and as long as everything's working correctly, and it should be fine, right? So that's the idea of it. And ADS-B brings a lot to the table. So it brings a lot of things like we can get ADS-B traffic in the airplane, so we can get that on ForeFlight or on some other device. We can get also ADS-B weather, so we can get radar images uploaded to us in however as quick as they can refresh, 5 minutes sometimes, 10 minutes. We get METARs, TAFs, we can get all that in the cockpit now. And that's for free, and all we need to do is have an ADS-B receiver for that. But our airplane, if it's required, needs to broadcast it out. So let's talk about where ADS-B is required to be used. And that's these places. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So inside of the Mode C veil surrounding Class B airspace. So surrounding Class B, you're going to have ADS-B. In and above Class Charlie airspace, not below it, but in it or above it, you need ADS-B. So one quick way to imagine this, just kind of so as I'm going through it, you can kind of see it a little bit better. Any place you need a transponder to be on, you're going to have ADS-B. and one other place. So we'll talk about that last. So you needed Class E airspace from 10,000 feet MSL, unless you're within 2,500 feet of the ground and still in Class E, then you don't need it. So Class Alpha airspace, you need it Class A. And the last thing, which is the oddity, it's within 12 nautical miles of the U.S. coastline from 3,000 feet to 10,000 MSL in the Gulf of Mexico only. So not in the Pacific, not Atlantic, in the Gulf of Mexico. All right. So it's really important to know where ADSB is required when using ADSB traffic, because in areas where ADSB isn't required, airplanes may not have it. Now, if it's in a high volume area, like a busy area, and you just happen to be slightly outside the ADSB requirements, then a lot of people are going to have it because they're going to those places. They're going to go into Cluster Charlie. They're going to go within the Mode C veil. So even though they're outlying areas, they're most likely going to have it in the airplane, but not for sure. And then like places like the middle of Wyoming, where there's really no Class Delta, nothing around, there's no real reason to have it unless you happen to be above 10,000 MSL, which you can be in Wyoming because it's quite high elevation through there. You know, normal elevation is about 6,000, 7,000 feet. So it is likely you'll have targets there at those altitudes, but not below necessarily. So some airplanes just fly around without ADSB. There is a graphic, which is in the newsletter, that you can get from CFIBootcamp.com, and it will show you where ADSB is required in graphical format. I wish I could show it to you, I guess, now, but it wouldn't be that useful. Better if you can get it at FAA.gov, by the way. So if you don't want to join the newsletter for whatever reason, then you can get it at FAA.gov, and it's got a nice graphic of where it's required. Okay, so that's basically the ADSB requirements. It's also you'll see on the graphic it says Class E 10,000 feet and above ADSB requirement. Then it says CONUS only, CONUS. So a lot of people don't know what CONUS means. So it means that means contiguous United States in the lower 48. So where all the states are connected by borders. Does not include Alaska. Does not include Hawaii. Doesn't include the U.S. territories. So ADSB is not necessarily required there. So but this graphic is for CONUS, our lower 48. And you can go onto FAA.gov again, and you can see more about that. And that's what I would encourage you to do. All right, topic number 2, we're talking about advection fog. It's almost time for the fog in San Francisco to go away for the winter, and it'll come right back again in the summertime. And it's an interesting phenomenon. If you've ever been to San Francisco, I lived there for a lot of years. We have very familiar with advection fog coming through the Golden Gate, and you see beautiful pictures of it. It's an amazing thing. But advection fog is different than radiation fog. So talk about radiation fog just for a second. Areas kind of in low valleys with particulate matter in the air, like near factories, places that plow a lot and particles are in the air and stay suspended in the air for a while, are subject to radiation fog, because radiation fog is usually really thin, and basically what happens is at night the ground starts to radiate heat back into the atmosphere. And the moist air just above the surface, if it's got moisture in it and particulate matter, then this radiation is going to start cooling the air just above it, because the ground is now starting to release the heat, and so it's starting to cool the moist air from below. And so it only does that for a little bit, and then it stops. So it's typically pretty thin, a few hundred feet sometimes, maybe as much as, I've seen it as much as 1,000 feet, but not much more than that. But typically in the hundreds of feet. And what happens is then it's around those areas where you've got factories, low-lying valleys, where there's a lot of particulate matter, and then it forms on cold, clear nights. So it's going to be in the California, it's going to be a wintertime feature, right? It's like out in the Central Valley. We used to have the entire valley used to fog up from all the way from north of Redding all the way down to the Grapevine, which is past Bakersfield. I mean, that's 400 miles of fog, right? And that was radiation fog, and that was called tule fog for the tule native plant. There was a plant like a reed, and that was given to by the local, I think the Ohlone Indians coined that. They called it tule fog. So anyway, that's not as big a feature as it used to be, but it still does happen. So that mechanism requires no wind or very, very light wind, because as soon as you get wind in the equation, the atmosphere around there begins to mix, and the heat starts building back in due to friction and also just moving the air mass around into other areas, and it doesn't stay. So you're only going to find it on cool nights where there's particulate matter or some kind of matter around, and it's going to be when it's not overcast. If it's overcast, you're not going to get radiation fog because the ground cannot radiate the energy back up into space. So that's the mechanism for it. Now, advection fog works entirely differently. So it requires wind to form. So let's look at San Francisco's advection fog and how it forms and how it dissipates in the summertime. It's a summertime feature. So over the sea, all the air is moist over the sea, and the sea is cold in San Francisco. It's 50-some degrees, 58 degrees, 56, 54 in this region, right? It's a perfect combination for thick fog to form because you have a very cold ocean, you have moist air, and you're going to get sea fog, and it's going to be pretty thick. So during the daytime, the ground in the Bay Area begins to be heated by the sun. So this is the beginning of the mechanism. This causes a low pressure area to form. So the hotter it gets, the more low pressure. So you can also think about in the Sacramento area where you actually have a channel that runs called the Delta. It runs from Sacramento area, that area, all the way through passing Mount Diablo, passing Concord, California, into the San Francisco Bay and out to the Golden Gate Bridge. That's entirely passable by a boat. So and there's no terrain except for on the sides, and so it's a delta. So anyway, you can imagine when the Sacramento Valley heats even more, it gets even hotter. It even makes a deeper area of low pressure. And this low pressure area then, as the evening approaches and the higher pressure from the sea, that sea fog is drawn through the Golden Gate. It's the biggest gap, kind of a big gap. It's right where the Golden Gate Bridge is, and you're into the estuary of San Francisco Bay, which, by the way, what's his name, missed it many times. The Spaniard Drake, missed that, I don't know how many times before. Then they used to go hunting for eggs out in the Farallon Islands, which 26 miles off the coast. They just didn't see it because it's too far and foggy. So then one day they saw it and they said, wow, this is a pretty cool place, right? And hence the Bay Area was born at that point from the Spanish. So anyway, that gap is a place where the fog can get sucked through to get to the area of low pressure. And that continues, so that's going to start in the evening time in San Francisco. So it's going to be beginning of an evening feature. Usually around 7 o'clock at night, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, you see the sea fog start, the advection fog start coming through. In addition, there's usually a wind from the northwest, and that helps push the fog through the gaps right through there and across the hills sometimes because you need a little bit of wind for it to form. So that combination of the low pressure area and the wind then causes the fog to roll in. And it does that, right? And so it keeps pulling in. And then at some point, it will stop. It'll stop because it's just too hot, like in the Central Valley, to have enough moisture to sustain the amount of moisture that's there. So it won't work. So that's as far as it will go. And then what happens is during the daytime, then the sun comes back up, and it starts heating this fog from above. And this fog can be thousands of feet thick. It's not uncommon to be not on top by 3,000 or 4,000 feet, right? Or sometimes 2,000. I'd say typically would be about 2,000, 2,500, but it's not atypical for it to be thicker. So it's a real thick fog. So it takes a while to dissipate, and so that's why the sun starts working on that, and that's why we don't get to fly till about a VFR until about 10 to 11 o'clock there in the Bay Area, San Francisco area, Palo Alto, San Carlos airports, Hayward to some extent. They're all going to open up around then and then start closing back down around 7. And the coastal airports in the summertime, which will be Half Moon Bay, Salinas, Monterey, Watsonville, those areas in the South Bay then, they don't open up sometimes at all during the summertime. They'll just be overcast the entire day. Although not Salinas has a better chance, and Watsonville a little bit. Half Moon Bay quite a bit. Another thing we do, by the way, I don't know if you're thinking in this way, but something fun to do is a lot of times these AWOSs and ASOSs that are located at airports, they're not really looking that far. And so they may say it's clear at the airport, and it very well be, or maybe a few clouds, but just maybe around it in its perimeter or on the approach end, maybe it's completely fogged in, right? There's no way you could make it there. If you got there, you might be able to like spiral down or something and get in, but in general, you wouldn't be able to make it there. So we use webcams, right? So there's Sam's Chowder House is in Half Moon Bay, and it has a webcam that looks right at the airport, looks at that area down there, and it looks out so we can see the sea fog and see if it's formed yet. So a lot of times, just local webcams can be very handy to find out how things look, and they're beginning to add webcams at airports, which is kind of useful. So the other thing we also have to continue on with this is right by San Francisco Airport, it's the San Bruno Gap. It's by San Bruno, the area of San Bruno, and that area is also a gap. And so fog can come through there, and that's why San Francisco Airport gets fogged over a lot of times during the evening and then into the mornings. It doesn't really get VFR until later in the day. And also the wind comes through there, comes howling through there if you've been through there before. The wind in San Francisco can be drastically different and stronger than Palo Alto Airport, which is only, say, 15 miles or so to the south. So, yeah, it can be quite different. So anyway, then this fog spreads and goes through what's called the Strait of Carquinez, or Carquinez Strait, which is on the other side of San Francisco Bay into that delta I was telling you about that goes out as a kind of a big river area out into the Central Valley. And that's the way it works. So advection fog is a summertime feature. It doesn't happen much in the wintertime because not enough heating to cause low pressure areas. So that sort of goes away. There's a song, a Christmas song called Christmas by the Bay. And it says, the fog's a memory that we're turning in May. And that's when it's talking about November, December, holiday time. There's hardly any fog. And that's the reason for it. So in that particular case, we don't care if it's overcast or not. It will still form. It'll just maybe not as form as much if the ground didn't heat up as much. And if the wind is still whipping in from the Golden Gate or through the San Bruno Pass, it'll still bring it in. So that's a nice feature we got. Then the winds shift a little bit. The low pressure area begins to go south and move away from the bay so we can let the storms in. So that feature of the northwest wind begins to be a little less of a thing. So that's why that works like that. Okay, so now you know all about advection fog. The other mechanism, I guess, is one other place to talk about. And that's in general if you have warm, moist air and you can push it over cold ground. Then that cold ground, really cold ground, will then cool the air above it to the dew point. And if you keep pushing it with the wind like that, you'll get advection fog there too. So that's another way we get advection fog. All right, the last main topic before we get to the pro tips are going to be, we're going to announce a new location, and it is in Las Vegas, Nevada. I think we talked Nevada. Sorry, I said it wrong. And I got corrected on that, by the way. It's not Nevada. They told me right away, you're in Nevada, not Nevada. I'm like, oh, okay. Didn't know that was a thing, but now I do. So anyway, in Nevada, we're at Chenault Flying Service in North Las Vegas, VGT, Victor Golf Tango. And nice facility. They fly Diamond aircraft. They've got a couple Cessnas, but most of them are Diamonds. We're going to do a class there every 3 months, and there's something kind of fun that we can do there, and we can operate. I become an instructor under their 141 certificate if I teach the ground. And so I can do all the ground under Chenault's 141 certificate. It's our program, but we push it up into the syllabus so everything gets covered, right? It is graded out. And so we can do that under Part 141. However, before you get all excited over that, there is no 141 standalone ground course. Those don't exist. So you've got to do the whole thing. So the issue with that, and you can do this, by the way, you don't have to do it Part 141. You could just show up and do the ground like normal. But if you needed a 141 for some reason, and there can be good reasons for it, the first reason is VA benefits. VA won't pay unless it's a 141 approved CFI program. So fine. So what's the drawback? The drawback is if you need to complete under 141, then you have to have 25 hours in the airplane. Now, we find that too much. That's a lot, right? The ground side, we easily meet that. But on the flight side, we can usually finish people 10, 15 hours. We don't need 25. But yet we have to do it if we're doing it under Part 141. And that's okay. But that's how you, for the BA benefits or anybody else who absolutely has to have the 141, you cannot just get a 141, ground 141 on the way and say, I'm going to stop the flight portion. So basically, if you think about it, it doesn't really change how you would, anything about our program. Basically, you come, it's the same exact thing, 7 days, plus some extra things to fill in what's required for 141 for me to be able to sign it off. And then, if you leave right then, you still get all the endorsements from us letting you take a test under any Part 61 program. You just can't complete it under Part 141. And that probably doesn't matter to you if you don't need VA benefits or something like that. So that's what I'll tell you. So we're going to do that about once a quarter, about once every 3 months. First class went through, and they were great. Now we had 9 in the class, so we had 8 in person and 1 that went from California, from Millbrae, right next to San Francisco Airport, and all about the San Bruno Gap right there. And the fog. So that person was remote, and then we had another person who had to go home one day early so he could get to work, and he did the next day remote. So we had one person who was 6 days in person, 1 day remote. And so they all finished, and everything is good there, and we're looking forward to doing the next class. So that's what we're going to be doing about every 3 months. So if you're interested in doing that, there's a couple advantages too, by the way. One of the advantages is if you fly a Diamond aircraft, a DA-40, if you've never flown one before, there's 2 things you're going to like about it. The first thing is it's about the easiest airplane I've ever flown in my life. I don't know of an airplane that's easier to fly than that. If you don't like stalls, I guess, but if you don't like that, this thing, it kind of stalls. I don't know what to call it. It's like a shake. It shake a lot, but that's about all it does. It really doesn't do anything. So even the power on, if you power into it and just pull hard on the stick, it's still it's like this, like nothing. And then it's got a cast-ring nose wheel, so if you're inclined to land sideways, it will straighten itself out. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just saying that if you want an airplane that's super forgiving, those are the ones, and they've got plenty of them there. So I also give you, if you think about the time you might spend, so say you did it not under Part 141, say you did it Part 61, then you'd fly with either us or them there, and you'd be done, say, 10, 15 hours, but you'd also have another airplane that you can fly under your belt with enough time in it to be insurable. So that's something interesting, right? But like I say, there's 172 there as well. There's a 171 or 172 G1000s and more coming. So there's that. So then, now let's look at the pro tips for the week. Like those, huh? All right, you ready? These are fun. Some of these are fun. So winter is silly putty time. What? Silly putty. Silly putty is an old toy for kids that was really common in like the 60s and 70s. And basically what it is this putty substance. It was a silicon-based, like a rubberized sort of thing. And it came in like an egg, a plastic egg container that you could split in half, and you could put the putty in there. So what the kids did with it, because it was before iPad, right? You had to do shit, right? So anyway, they rolled in a ball, they threw it against the wall, and pop, it bounced like crazy. It would bounce like forever. And then the other thing you could do with it, which was, again, of the time, no iPads, so you could flatten it out, and you could put it underneath some comic image in a comic book, and you could peel it up, and the image would transfer onto silly putty. That was always great fun, but, so why am I talking about silly putty? You can still get it. And why do I use it? Because I have 2 containers I fly in that have it. They're not small. They're about, like, I think the whole thing would be an inch in diameter. It's less than the size of a golf ball. But it's super handy when the wintertime comes. And those eyeball vents that these pilots, I call them, it's open as far as we'll go, and they have to, like, get an extra quarter turn off it, or cinch it down an extra quarter. You can never get them open or closed. Well, anyway, some of them leak, too. So you can take that silly putty, you can jam it in there, and it won't leak anymore, I can tell you that. And like if you have a window, I don't know if you've been flying long enough, you probably would know that if you on a Cessna 172, you close the window, and you're flying maybe IFR, maybe, or it's raining outside, and the rains are coming in through the gap in the window. Yeah, some of you are air, like, ooh, gee, the heater doesn't work. Yes, I didn't bring a coat, it's really cold in here. You can take your silly putty and just strap it in there. And the thing about silly putty is that it doesn't stick to anything. So you can pull it, it come right out. So it won't have left a mark, so to speak. So that's what you need. You need to plug those holes with some silly putty. Okay, try it. Second tip of the day, and let's get this straight. So some of you have decided that because you're a flight instructor, that you're gonna do things your own way. You're going to be able to transfer knowledge to somebody else of things that they didn't even know they needed to know. You're one of those, right? And you're not, but there are plenty of them out there. And one of them existed at Advantage Aviation, and basically no more. And I think some of you might know, but anyway, that person had a different way to do everything. I woke up, I had an epiphany, and we've been flying for 120 years, but yet I have just figured this better way out. You haven't, by the way. You have not, unless it's a very specialty kind of flying. So, for a glide slope, right, here's what I need you to really understand. You're going to hold the glide slope with elevator, not power. And you're going to maintain airspeed with power. So, if you try to do that with power, then that will work in a very light aircraft where the center of gravity is below the thrust line or above the thrust line. because when you put in power, then it will cause the nose to pitch up a little bit. Take it out, it'll cause the nose to go, if that couple is there. And if you're very light. But if you're a heavy airplane, and I don't even mean that heavy, 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 pounds, you try to change it with power, the airplane has momentum. And so it's going to overshoot or undershoot. You're not going to be able to control it that finely with power. You're going to have to use elevator. And that's the fastest way to change the flight path of any airplane, right? It's by elevator. If you're going to hit something coming right at you and hit something, I can tell you, if you decide to make it, I'm going to turn to the right to avoid, right? And it's right there on your face, and you can see David Clark on the side of Bose on the side of the headset. You take the stick and you jam it into the far forward as you can go. You'll change the flight path like that. You know, when you turn, it's like, oh, I'm going to turn now. My turn. Oh, now I'm starting to turn. I'm starting slowly. I'm going to go into quicker. No, that's far enough away you can do that. But you can do that at the same time that you're either pitching down or pulling up as hard as you can to get away. So the other problem is, so for example, for those of you who still don't believe it, I also fly a Citation jet, a CJ, right? Flew. And the engines, Rolls-Royce engines, are way up above the center of gravity, way in the back and way high. So when you add power, what do you think happens? Do you think the airplane pitch up? No, it does not. It pitches down. So are you going to pull power to rise up on the glide slope and then pitch? No, you're not going to do that, right? It doesn't make any sense. So don't rely on that pitch moment coupling of the thrust line and where the thrust line is and where the CG is. Use elevator. And if you look at any autopilot system with auto throttles, you will find out right away that they're using elevator to control what? Glide slope. Okay, there's that. Hopefully you got that now. All right, this is the last thing I want to tell you. And this thing is really cool. So I'm going to give you a really fun thing here. It's one thing, best things I teach pilots. And I'm going to teach you how to do it. Hopefully you'll be able to get it. I can't tell you. I think I can. It's also discussed in Stick and Rudder by Wolfgang Langewiesche. So maybe there's a resource for you. But basically, this is basically the way it works. So it would be really great to know what angle to the earth would be the shallowest angle that you can possibly descend at for the conditions and the steepest. Because what happens when some engine failure happens, people typically come into a place and they're usually too high, not too low, because they're afraid of overshooting. They're afraid of overshooting, or undershooting, sorry. So what do? They end up overshooting, right? And yet, you could have seen whether you're going to undershoot or overshoot a country mile away or 500 country miles away if you just understood this simple technique. So let's talk about it. So we need to determine the shallowest angle that you can descend to the earth. In other words, and that is going to be a best glide with the engine at idle, because that's what you'd be doing to get there, right? So then do that, trim the airplane up for that at some altitude, say 5,000 feet or some in this region, right? And let the airplane get stable, and then look straight ahead and see what's not moving. Some patch of ground's not moving. It might not be a single tree, but it's an area. And if you kind of still can't find it, look down the trees down below. They're coming toward you, right? All that stuff coming toward you is because you're too high, right? But what's exactly not moving is where your wheels are going to touch down if you don't do anything else. That's where you're going. That's your angle to the earth. And anything that's going up the windscreen, even the slightest little bit, you cannot make, right? That angle is beyond you, the angle that you've got. So then, once you've got that, then take your hand, like this, out in the front, and measure from the horizon how many fingers down that point is. Or you can say it's this much, or 10 degrees, whatever the angle is. You can either do it in degrees, you can do it finger, two hand, whatever you got, right? Do something like that, but get a mental idea of the shallowest angle that you can descend at. That's as far as you can go. So whatever's not moving is as far as you can go. That's the first angle. And then we want the steepest one to say that, well, if I want to be able to go somewhere, like straight down below me, yeah, I can get there. Like, the Air Force, you just roll upside down and pull straight down. You'll get there, you'll go, but you won't be able to land because you'll be 1,000,000 miles an hour by the time you get there, right? So you need to be at an angle that you can control the descent path and the speed, right? At both. So then the way you determine that is go back up about 5,000 feet, same thing. Put in all the flaps, powered idle, right? And then once you've got those in, then slip, right? And maintain the approach speed for the airplane. As you're going to land off this, right? 65 knots, 60 knots in 172. And then look out again and see what point's not moving. You'll find that point that's not moving is way steeper. It's closer to you. It's not farther. It's not that same place. It's closer to you. Now that place is closer to you. And because you're slipping and you've got full flap in and no power, that's as steep as you can go. So then, again, take your hand. There's the horizon on top of the hand. How many fingers below the horizon is it? Or how many angle is it? Or how many inches is it? Whatever you want to say. That's the steepest angle that you can get to the earth and not have an increase of airspeed over the approach speed. So between those two, all you have to do when you look outside and say, can I make that point? You look out ahead and you see how many degrees below the horizon it is, right? And if it's that within that band, you can make it. If it's outside of that band, you're not going to make it. You're going to be too steep or too shallow. And that's the tips I want to give you. I think that's all I've got. Yeah, today. See if there's anything else I want to tell you. No, I guess if you want a hard copy of the newsletter, go to CFIBootcamp.com. You'll find a way to do it. Please join the Power Hour. It's live every Saturday from noon until 1 o'clock Eastern time. So that's tomorrow. This newsletter will not be out by then, so you missed that one. And that's kind of a fun one. We're doing crazy instrument approaches and fun ones. So I don't know if you know, but there's some really fun instrument approaches out there. There's one in Portsmouth, Missouri. I think it is Missouri, but it's from Tweety Bird. And Sylvester the cat. The cat's always trying to get Tweety Bird, and Tweety Bird always says, "I taught I saw a putty cat," and I did like that. So there's an approach there. Arnav, I think, is approach that has those fixes in order. I taught I saw a putty cat, and then the missed approach is I did. So those are kind of fun things. There's many things like that. Like there's a fix in Boston, right off Boston, called Lobster. It's just like LOBSTA. And then there's another one called Dunk, DUNKK, by Salem, called the dunking stool, right? There are all these things that they're really funny. And then we've got a few others in Atlanta. There's a Star Wars, a Star, can you believe that, right? The Death Star. So there's a Jedi, it's a Jedi 3 arrival with all the Star Wars names in there. And then there's Gandalf for Lord of the Rings. There's a bunch of things like that throughout. So we're covering that for tomorrow, a bunch of those. And just difficult approaches in general. Like you can look at MTN, Martin. It's in Baltimore. And it's a VOR approach you're looking for. And what it is, the entire approach is a big DME arc. It's the whole approach is an arc. And then if you didn't like that, the missed approach is also another arc. So if you got confused on the first arc, you get a chance to get the missed approach right, I guess. So those are just fun things. So we're going to go through those and some back courses and the only SDF approach, simplified directional facility left in the country is Morristown, Tennessee. You can see that one. So anyway, those are just fun things. And you can, I forgot what the power hours are after that. So anyway, that's all I got for you this week. So I hope you enjoyed it and hope you're where you want to be by now or well on your way. Or you're just chilling out at home. All right, have a cold one for me. That's it for flight training the way I see it.